the wish she couldn't grant. The fluorescent lights of Miller's department store hummed overhead as Grace wiped her tired eyes. Her shift at Pearl's Diner had ended 30 minutes ago, and she'd picked up Tommy from after-school care with exactly 47 minutes before her evening cleaning job started across town. Most mothers took their children to parks or play dates. Grace took hers to browse store aisles because it was warm, free, and Tommy loved it. "Mom, look!" Tommy's voice rang out with 6-year-old excitement as he sprinted down the toy aisle, his second-hand sneakers squeaking against the linoleum. Grace followed, her waitress shoes already making her feet ache, mentally calculating whether she had enough gas to make it through the week. Tommy stood transfixed before a display of toys, but his attention fixed entirely on one item. The red fire truck sat on the middle shelf, gleaming under the lights like a ruby. It had extending ladders, working lights, and even made realistic siren sounds. Grace had seen him press his face against this same window display for 3 weeks now, ever since they'd started their evening routine of killing time before her second job. "It's the same one. Mom! The same one from the window." Tommy's brown eyes were wide with wonder as he carefully touched the box, treating it like a treasure. "Can we? Let me see the price, honey," Grace interrupted gently, though she already knew what she'd find. Her fingers found the tag. $49.99. She might as well have been reading 1,000. After rent, utilities, groceries, and Tommy's school supplies, she had maybe $60 to last until her next paycheck in 9 days. $60 that needed to cover gas, food, and the dozen other emergencies that always seemed to crop up. Grace crouched down to Tommy's level, brushing his dark hair from his forehead. "Baby, this one's a little too expensive right now. Maybe for your birthday?" His birthday was 7 months away, but it was all she could offer. Tommy's face fell, but he nodded with the resignation of a child who'd heard similar words too many times. "Okay, Mom, can I just look at it for one more minute?" "1 more minute," Grace agreed, her heart cracking as she watched him memorize every detail of the toy through the clear plastic window of the box. How many times had she failed him like this? How many small wishes had she crushed under the weight of bills and survival? She stood and walked a few feet away, ostensibly checking her phone for the time, but really hiding the tears that threatened to fall. Through blurred vision, she stared at that red fire truck, wishing with everything in her that she could just once, just one single time, be the mother who could say yes. The mother who could make her son's eyes light up with something other than disappointment. Tommy carefully placed the toy back on the shelf, running his small fingers along the box one last time. "Come on, sweetie. Let's go look at the books. Those we can sit and read for free," Grace said, forcing brightness into her voice that she didn't feel. As they walked toward the book section, Grace glanced back one more time at that fire truck, sitting there on its shelf like a small, impossible dream. She didn't notice the man standing at the end of the aisle, a hammer holster still clipped to his belt from his workday, watching the entire scene with an expression of recognition and pain that mirrored her own. Tommy held her hand tightly as they walked, already chattering about whether they should read books about dinosaurs or space. Grace squeezed back, reminding herself that her son had her love, had food, had safety. Those were the things that mattered. That's what she told herself. But deep down, she wondered when she'd stop feeling like she was failing him, one small disappointment at a time. A stranger's gift Marcus stood frozen at the end of the toy aisle, his calloused hand gripping the handle of his shopping cart until his knuckles turned white. He'd come to Miller's for a simple errand, picking up a birthday gift for his niece Emma, his sister's daughter who was turning 7 next week. Instead, he'd just witnessed a scene that struck him like a physical blow to the chest. The young mother's face, the way she'd crouched down to eye level with her son, the careful gentleness in her voice as she delivered disappointing news, it all reminded Marcus of Rachel. His late wife had possessed that same tender strength, that ability to break hard news with soft hands. Rachel would have been a magnificent mother. They'd been trying for 2 years before the diagnosis came, stage 4. The doctors said 6 months. She'd fought for 18, but in the end, cancer didn't negotiate. That was 2 years ago. 2 years of Marcus going through the motions, waking up, going to his carpentry shop, building cabinets and furniture for other people's homes while his own remained empty except for memories. His sister Jennifer kept telling him he needed to get back out there. But how do you explain to someone that you're not hiding from life? You're just not sure what to do with it anymore. He watched as the mother and son disappeared around the corner toward the book section. The red fire truck sat on the shelf, indifferent to the small drama it had just caused. Marcus looked at his own cart, containing the dollhouse he'd picked out for Emma, $53. He'd barely glanced at the price. Money wasn't tight for him. His custom furniture business had been doing well, almost too well lately, since he'd been throwing himself into work to avoid the silence of his empty house. $50. That's all it would take to make that little boy's face light up. $50 that clearly meant the difference between eating and not eating for that mother. Marcus's feet moved before his brain fully processed the decision. He grabbed the fire truck from the shelf, the box heavier than he expected, and walked quickly toward the book section. His heart hammered in his chest. What was he doing? This was crazy. She might be offended. She might think he was some creep trying to use money to get close to her. She might. He spotted them in the children's section. The boy sat cross-legged on the floor, absorbed in a picture book about firefighters. Of course it was about firefighters, while his mother stood nearby, checking her phone with a worried expression. Probably watching the time, Marcus realized. She'd mentioned something about having to be somewhere. The mother had her back partially turned, talking softly to her son about needing to leave in 5 minutes. Marcus's window of opportunity was closing. Before he could second-guess himself again, he moved quietly past them, spotted her shopping. Cart parked at the end of the aisle, containing only a small pack of discount cookies and a bottle of generic children's vitamins, and gently placed the fire truck inside. His hands were shaking. When was the last time he'd done something that made his hands shake? He turned to walk away, to disappear into the store before she noticed, but he'd only made it 3 steps when he heard her voice. "Excuse me, sir?" Marcus stopped, turned slowly. The young mother was standing by her cart, holding the fire truck box, her expression cycling through confusion, shock, and something that might have been the beginning of tears. "I think you accidentally put this in the wrong cart," she said, but her voice was uncertain, like she suspected that wasn't actually what happened. Marcus took a breath. Rachel's voice echoed in his memory, one of the last conversations they'd had when she was so weak she could barely whisper. "Don't let grief make you small, Marcus. Don't let it close you off. Promise me you'll stay open to moments of grace." He'd promised, though he hadn't really understood what she meant. Maybe this was it. "No accident," Marcus said, meeting her eyes. They were green, he noticed, and currently swimming with unshed tears. "I saw you and your son looking at it earlier. Some wishes are meant to come true." "I can't," she started, but her voice broke. "I can't accept this. It's too much. I don't even know you." Marcus took a step closer, keeping his posture open and non-threatening. "You're right, you don't know me. My name is Marcus Reeves. I'm a carpenter here in town. I lost my wife 2 years ago to cancer. We never got the chance to have kids, and she would have loved that little boy's excitement over that fire truck." He paused, surprised by how much he'd just revealed to a complete stranger. "I'm not trying to make you uncomfortable. You don't owe me anything. I had the means to make a kid smile today, and in this world, that feels like something worth doing." The little boy had appeared beside his mother now, looking up at the fire truck in her hands with barely contained hope. "Mom? Is that—" "Tommy, sweetie, just give me a minute," she said softly. But Marcus could see her resolve crumbling. She looked at her son's face, then back at Marcus, then at the toy. "Please," Marcus added quietly, "let me do this. For your son, for my wife's memory, for whatever reason makes it okay for you to accept it." A tear finally escaped down her cheek. She wiped it away quickly. "I'm Grace," she said finally. "Grace Patterson. And this is Tommy." She set the fire truck down in the cart, then extended her hand. "Thank you doesn't seem like nearly enough, but thank you. You have no idea what this means." Marcus shook her hand, feeling the roughness of hard work in her palm that matched his own. "Actually, I think I might have some idea. Merry early Christmas, Tommy." Tommy's face split into a grin so wide it seemed to take up his entire face. "Thank you, Mr. Marcus." "Thank you, thank you, thank you." "You're very welcome, buddy." Grace pulled her son close, kissing the top of his head while keeping her eyes on Marcus. "I don't know how I can ever repay you." "You can't," Marcus said simply. "That's kind of the point. But maybe—" He hesitated, then pushed forward, feeling like Rachel was somewhere nodding approvingly. "Maybe you could tell me where a guy could get a decent cup of coffee in this town? I'm still relatively new back here. Moved back 6 months ago to help take care of my mom." Grace laughed, a sound of surprise and relief. "I work at Pearl's Diner on 5th Street. Best coffee in town, or at least that's what our sign claims. I'm there most mornings 7 to 3. "Pearl's on 5th, Marcus repeated, committing it to memory. "I'll have to check it out." They stood there for another moment, neither quite sure how to end this unexpected encounter. Finally, Grace glanced at her phone and winced. "I have to go. My next job starts in 20 minutes across town." "2 jobs?" Marcus asked before he could stop himself. "2 jobs," Grace confirmed without elaboration. "Come on, Tommy! We need to drop this fire truck home and get Mommy to work." As they walked toward the checkout, Tommy turned back and waved enthusiastically at Marcus. Marcus waved back, feeling something strange and unfamiliar stirring in his chest. It took him a moment to identify it. Hope. Not the crushing weight of what he'd lost, but the tentative possibility of what might still be possible. He stood there in the children's book section for a long moment after they'd gone, surrounded by stories of adventure and happy endings, wondering if he'd just started writing a new chapter of his own story. Rachel would have liked Grace, he thought. She would have appreciated her obvious strength, her love for her son, the way she'd tried to refuse help even when she desperately needed it. Marcus picked up the dollhouse for Emma and headed toward checkout himself, but his mind was already planning a visit to Pearl's Diner. Just for coffee, he told himself, just to see if their sign's claim was accurate. But deep down, he knew he was hoping to see those green eyes again, to learn more about the woman who'd cracked something open in his carefully guarded heart. Unexpected encounters. The morning rush at Pearl's Diner had finally subsided, leaving Grace with a blessed moment to catch her breath. She leaned against the counter near the coffee station, rolling her aching shoulders and counting down the hours until her shift ended. Tommy had been over the moon about the fire truck for 3 days straight, sleeping with it beside his bed and taking it to show and tell at school. He'd made her promise at least 6 times that it was real, that it wouldn't disappear like a dream. Grace had tried to find Marcus Reeves online, not in a creepy way, she told herself, just to properly thank him or maybe send a card or something. But her ancient laptop took forever to load pages, and she'd fallen asleep at the kitchen table before finding anything useful. The memory of his kindness lingered, though, warming something inside her that had been cold for longer than she cared to admit. Grace. "Table 7 needs a refill," called out Donna, the other morning waitress and Grace's closest thing to a friend in town. At 53, Donna had been working at Pearl's for 17 years and knew every regular customer by name, order, and life story. Grace grabbed the coffee pot and headed to table 7, her mind already running through her afternoon logistics. Pick up Tommy from school, stop by the food bank if she had time, get home to let him do homework while she grabbed a 2-hour nap before her evening cleaning shift. It was a dance she performed 5 days a week, and she'd gotten pretty good at it. She was so lost in mental planning that she almost didn't notice who was sitting at table 7 until she was already pouring coffee into his mug. "Thank you, Grace." Her hand jerked slightly, nearly sloshing hot coffee onto the table. Those brown eyes, the kind face, the carpenter's hands wrapped around the white ceramic mug. "Marcus, you weren't kidding about the coffee," he said, a smile playing at the corners of his mouth. "That sign is truth in advertising." Grace felt her face flush. She was acutely aware that she probably looked terrible. Hair pulled back in a messy ponytail, minimal makeup, the unflattering Pearl's Diner uniform that was designed for function rather than fashion. How long have you been sitting here? I didn't see you come in." "Just a few minutes." "You seem deep in thought." I didn't want to interrupt. I'm so sorry. I should have been paying attention. Grace mentally kicked herself. This was exactly the kind of inattentiveness that got waitresses fired. Don't apologize. I'm the one who should apologize for not telling you I was planning to take you up on that coffee recommendation. I didn't want you to think I was stalking you or something weird. Marcus shifted in his seat, looking endearingly uncomfortable. That came out wrong. I'm not stalking you. I just really did want to try the coffee. Despite herself, Grace laughed. It's okay. I did tell you about pearls. You're allowed to show up. She glanced around the diner. Donna was watching from across the room with undisguised interest, and old Mr. Henderson at the counter was pretending to read his newspaper while clearly eavesdropping. Small-town diners were gossip central. Can I get you anything to eat? The Tuesday special is meatloaf, mashed potatoes, and green beans. Sounds perfect, Marcus said. And maybe you could tell me how Tommy's enjoying his fire truck? Grace felt her expression soften. He hasn't stopped playing with it. He's made me promise at least 20 times that it's really his to keep. Yesterday, he told his teacher that an angel gave it to him. She paused, feeling emotion creep into her voice. You really made his whole year, maybe his whole life so far. I'm glad. Marcus's voice was gentle. Every kid deserves to feel like their wishes matter. Grace scribbled down his order, though she'd already memorized it. I'll get this in for you. And Marcus, I'm really glad you came in. Me too, he said, and the sincerity in his voice made her heart do a strange little flip. Over the next week, Marcus became a regular fixture at Pearl's Diner. He showed up every Tuesday and Thursday morning, always sitting in Grace's section, always ordering something simple. They'd talk in the brief moments when the breakfast rush allowed. Small conversations about the weather, about Tommy's adventures with the fire truck, about Marcus's custom furniture projects. Grace learned that Marcus had grown up in this town, but left for 10 years to build his business in the city. He'd moved back when his mother started showing signs of dementia, wanting to be close to help his sister Jennifer, who was the primary caregiver. He learned that Grace had moved here 3 years ago from 2 states over, looking for a fresh start and a place where her ex-husband Derek wouldn't think to look for her. She didn't tell him everything, not about the bruises that had finally faded, not about the night she'd packed one suitcase and Tommy's favorite stuffed animal and driven through the night with $43 in her pocket. Some stories took longer to tell. By the 3rd week, Tommy had started asking about the fire truck man. When was he coming back? Could they see him again? Grace deflected, not wanting to presume anything about Marcus's intentions. But her son's questions echoed her own thoughts more than she wanted to admit. It was a Thursday morning, unseasonably warm for late January, when Marcus came in carrying a small wooden box. Grace was refilling water glasses when she noticed him slide into his usual booth. Yes, it had become his usual booth, though neither of them had explicitly acknowledged this fact. Morning, she greeted him, coffee pot already in hand. The usual? Actually, just coffee today, but I brought something. Marcus pushed the wooden box across the table. This is for Tommy. I made it in my shop. Nothing fancy. Just thought he might like a place to keep his fire truck when he's not playing with it. Grace set down the coffee pot and picked up the box. It was beautiful. Smooth sanded wood with a simple latch, and carved into the lid was a fire truck with Tommy burned into the wood beneath it. The craftsmanship was incredible, every detail carefully considered. Marcus, this is... Her voice caught. You made this? When? He shrugged, looking embarrassed. I had some spare time in the evenings. It only took a few hours. I thought, if he has a special place for it, it might feel even more important to him. Grace traced the carved fire truck with her finger, feeling tears threaten again. Why did this man keep making her cry? You barely know us. Why are you doing these things? Marcus was quiet for a moment, his hands wrapped around his coffee mug. Honestly, I'm not entirely sure. When Rachel died, I sort of shut down. I worked. I took care of practical things, but I wasn't really living. Then I saw you and Tommy in that store, and something shifted. Doing something kind for someone else, it reminded me what it feels like to be human. He looked up at her. Maybe I'm being selfish. Maybe helping you is really just helping myself remember how to feel things again. That's not selfish, Grace said softly. That's just honest. Can I ask you something? Marcus ventured. And you can absolutely say no, but would it be okay if I stopped by sometime when Tommy's around? Just to give him the box in person? I think it might mean more coming from me than having you relay it. Every instinct Grace had developed over the past 3 years screamed caution. She didn't let people get close, especially men. She didn't introduce Tommy to anyone she couldn't fully trust. She'd built walls for good reasons, and walls kept you safe. But then she looked at Marcus's hopeful face, at the beautiful box he'd spent his evening hours creating for a child he'd met once. And those walls felt less like protection and more like prison bars. Saturday afternoon, she heard herself say. We usually go to the park around 2 if the weather's nice. Riverside Park near the playground. Marcus's face lit up. Saturday at 2. I'll be there. As Grace walked away to put in orders and refill coffee cups, Donna materialized beside her with a knowing smirk. Girl, that man has it bad for you. We're just friends. Grace protested weakly. Mm-hmm. Friends who make custom toy boxes and show up twice a week for mediocre diner coffee? Sure. The coffee's not mediocre. The sign says best in town. The sign lies, and you know it. Donna hip-checked her gently. But seriously, honey, when's the last time you let yourself have something good? Something just for you? Grace didn't have an answer for that. She wasn't sure she'd ever had something just for her. First there was survival, then there was Derek, then there was escape, then there was Tommy and Bills and just making it through each day. Where exactly was there room for something good in that equation? But Saturday afternoon, she found herself actually caring about what she wore to the park. She found herself feeling nervous butterflies as 2 o'clock approached. And when Tommy spotted Marcus walking toward them carrying the wooden box and shouted, "It's the fire truck man!" Before running full speed to greet him, she found herself smiling in a way that had nothing to do with politeness or survival and everything to do with simple, uncomplicated happiness. Maybe, just maybe, there could be room for something good after all. Healing together winter gave way to early spring, and what started as occasional park meetings evolved into regular Saturday afternoon hangouts. Marcus brought his tools one day and helped Tommy build a birdhouse. Another time, they flew kites on the first truly warm day of March. Grace watched these interactions with a mixture of joy and terror, seeing her son bloom under the attention of a kind male figure while simultaneously waiting for the other shoe to drop. Because shoes always dropped. People always left or changed or revealed their true colors. That's what her experience had taught her. It was mid-April when Grace's ancient car finally gave up completely. She'd known it was coming. The mechanic had been warning her for months about the transmission, but knowing didn't make it any less devastating. Without a car, her carefully balanced house of cards collapsed. No car meant no way to get to her evening cleaning jobs across town, which meant losing half her income. She'd sat in Pearl's parking lot after her shift ended, staring at her dead car and doing math that refused to work out. A new transmission cost more than she made in 2 months. A used car was a fantasy. The bus system in town was limited and wouldn't get her to her evening job on time. She'd actually put her head down on the steering wheel and let herself cry for 5 minutes before forcing herself to pull it together and figure out a solution. That's when her phone rang. Marcus. Hey, I was wondering if you and Tommy wanted to grab pizza tonight. There's this place near Grace. Are you okay? She'd tried to lie, to say everything was fine, but her voice betrayed her. Within 20 minutes, Marcus had shown up at the diner parking lot, taken one look at her tear-stained face and her dead car, and insisted on driving her home. Not just that day, but the next day, too. And the day after that. Marcus, this is too much, Grace protested on day 3 of him playing chauffeur. They were sitting in his truck outside her apartment building, Tommy already having run inside to do homework. You have your own life, your own business. You can't keep driving me around. Why not? Marcus asked simply. I have a truck. You need rides. The math seems pretty straightforward. Because I can't pay you back. Because I don't want to owe you. Because... She stopped, the real reason lodged in her throat like a stone. Because? Marcus prompted gently. Because people don't just help without wanting something in return, Grace finished quietly. Because in my experience, kindness comes with a price tag that shows up later. Marcus was silent for a long moment, his hands resting on the steering wheel. "Your ex," he said finally. It wasn't a question. Grace hadn't told him much about Derek, just the basics, that he was her ex-husband, that the relationship had been bad, that she'd left. But Marcus was perceptive. He'd probably figured out more than she'd said. Derek was charming at first, Grace heard herself saying. The words started slowly, then picked up speed like a confession too long held. Flowers, compliments, making me feel special. Then we got married, and I got pregnant, and things changed. Or maybe they didn't change. Maybe I just finally saw what was always there. She stared at her hands in her lap. It started small. Comments about my weight, my friends, how I spent money. Then it was controlling where I went, who I talked to. Then it was pushing, grabbing too hard, throwing things near me but not at me, until one day it was at me. And by then, I was so isolated, so convinced it was partly my fault that I stayed way longer than I should have. Grace felt Marcus's hand cover hers, warm and steady. She didn't pull away. The day I finally left, Tommy was 4. Derek threw a glass that shattered against the wall, and a piece of it cut Tommy's cheek. Just a small cut, barely needed a bandage, but seeing my baby's blood because of Derek's anger, something broke in me. Or maybe something finally healed. That night, after Derek passed out drunk, I packed what I could carry and drove. I didn't have a plan, didn't have money, just had to get out. Grace, so when you keep helping me, she continued, needing to finish now that she'd started. Part of me is grateful, and part of me is waiting for you to show me what I owe you, because that's how it always worked before. Kindness was just debt collection in disguise. Marcus was quiet, but he didn't let go of her hand. When he finally spoke, his voice was thick with emotion. "I'm going to tell you about the worst day of my life, and then I'm going to tell you why I keep showing up. Is that okay?" Grace nodded, not trusting her voice. "The worst day was when Rachel couldn't remember my name," Marcus began. Not at the end, that was sad but expected. This was 6 months before she died, when she was still mostly herself. We were having breakfast, and she looked at me with these confused eyes and called me "Sir," asked if I was the nurse. It lasted maybe 30 seconds before clarity came back, but in those 30 seconds I got a preview of the ending. He cleared his throat. Rachel was terrified of being forgotten. Not of dying, exactly, but of disappearing like she'd never mattered. So I promised her that I'd remember. That I'd keep her love alive by being the kind of person she believed I was. Someone who showed up, who helped, who stayed. Marcus turned to look at Grace directly. "I'm not helping you because I want something from you. I'm helping you because 2 years ago I promised my dying wife that I wouldn't let grief make me small and closed off. I'm helping you because being around you and Tommy reminds me what it feels like to be part of something larger than my own sadness. And yes, I'm helping you because over these past few months, I've started to care about you both a great deal." Grace felt tears sliding down her cheeks. "Marcus, you don't owe me anything," he said firmly. "Not gratitude, not repayment, not anything. If all we ever are is friends who meet on Saturdays and sometimes I give you rides, that's enough. If you decide tomorrow that this is too much and you need space, I'll understand. But please don't push me away because you're waiting for me to hurt you. I can't promise I'll never disappoint you. People are human and complicated. But I can promise I will never, ever intentionally hurt you or Tommy." They sat in the truck for a long moment, the evening darkening around them. Grace wanted to believe him so badly it physically ached. But belief required trust, and trust required vulnerability, and vulnerability had nearly destroyed her once. "I don't know how to do this," she whispered. "I don't know how to let someone in." "Then we'll figure it out together," Marcus said. "No pressure, no timeline. Just let me be here. Let me help until you're back on your feet. And if somewhere along the way you decide you trust me, that's a gift. But it's not a requirement." Grace took a shaky breath. "I'm going to need rides for a while. Maybe a few weeks until I can save up for car repairs. I can do that. And Tommy really likes you. If you're going to be around more, I need to know you're committed to that. I can't have him getting attached if you're going to disappear." "I'm not going anywhere," Marcus said steadily. "You have my word." "Okay," Grace said, the word feeling like jumping off a cliff. "Okay, thank you. For the rides, for the honesty, for everything." Marcus smiled, and Grace felt something in her chest unfurl slightly, like a flower carefully opening toward the sun. It wasn't love, not yet. It was too fragile and new to be called love, but it was possibility. It was hope. It was the first tentative belief that maybe, just maybe, there were still good people in the world who did good things without hidden agendas. As she climbed out of the truck and headed into her apartment building, Tommy waved from their window. Grace waved back, then turned to see Marcus still sitting in his truck, waiting to make sure she got inside safely. Such a small gesture. Such a huge difference from the man who used to lock her out when he was angry, making her wait on the porch in the cold until he decided she'd learned her lesson. That night, after Tommy was asleep, Grace allowed herself to imagine a future that included Saturday afternoons at the park, rides to work, maybe even dinners together. She imagined Tommy having a positive male role model. She imagined letting someone share her burdens instead of carrying everything alone. It was terrifying. But for the first time in years, it was also exciting. The healing wouldn't be linear. She knew that. There would be moments of panic, times when old fears rose up and tried to convince her this was all too good to be true. But maybe healing didn't require perfection. Maybe it just required showing up day after day and choosing to believe in the possibility of something better. Second chances. Summer arrived with unexpected heat, and with it came changes Grace hadn't anticipated. Marcus's mother had taken a turn for the worse, requiring more intensive care. Grace found herself bringing dinner to the house Marcus shared with his sister Jennifer, meeting his family, being folded into their crisis with a naturalness that both comforted and terrified her. Jennifer had pulled her aside one evening while Marcus sat with his mother. "He's different since he met you," she'd said. "More alive." "Thank you for that." Grace hadn't known what to say. She'd never been someone's reason to feel more alive before. By July, her car was fixed. Marcus had quietly arranged for his mechanic friend to do the work at cost, then refused to let Grace pay him back, calling it paying forward rather than lending. Tommy had started calling Marcus by his first name without the mister, and occasionally, when he was very tired or very happy, he'd slip and call him something else. Grace pretended not to notice these slips, not ready to examine what they meant. Things were good, steady. She'd started to believe that maybe the other shoe wouldn't drop after all. Then Derek showed up. It was a Tuesday evening in late August. Grace had just gotten home from her cleaning job, exhausted and looking forward to collapsing on the couch. Tommy was at Jennifer's house for a play date with Emma, something that had become a regular Tuesday occurrence. Grace had her key in the apartment door when she felt it, the prickling awareness that someone was watching. She turned around and her blood turned to ice. Derek leaned against the stairwell railing, looking older and harder than when she'd left. His jaw was shadowed with stubble, his eyes were cold, and his posture radiated barely controlled anger. "Hello, Grace." Her hand tightened on her keys, fingers positioned between her knuckles the way the women's shelter had taught her. "How did you find me? Did you really think you could just disappear?" Derek pushed off the railing, moving closer. Grace backed against her door. 3 years, Grace. 3 years you kept my son from me. You have no rights to him. The divorce gave me full custody. Divorce you filed in another state without proper notification. Derek's smile was sharp and ugly. My lawyer says we have grounds to contest it. Says I can get partial custody, maybe more if I prove you're an unfit mother. Single woman working 2 jobs, can barely afford rent, probably neglecting Tommy while you're out working all hours. I am not neglecting my son. Grace's voice was steady despite her shaking hands. And you need to leave. Now. This is a public space. I can stand here as long as I want. Derek crossed his arms. But I'm not here to fight, Gracie. I'm here to make things right. Come back. Bring Tommy. We'll be a family again. The old nickname made her skin crawl. No. No. Derek's expression darkened. You don't get to just say no. I'm his father. You're the man whose anger put a scar on his face, Grace shot back, surprising herself with her own courage. You're the reason I had to start over with nothing. You're the reason I taught my 5-year-old son what to do if Daddy starts throwing things. Derek moved forward fast, and Grace flinched despite herself. But he stopped just short of touching her, still so dramatic. "I never hit you, Grace. You act like I beat you or something. You threw things at me. You grabbed me hard enough to leave bruises. You isolated me from everyone I knew and made me believe I was worthless." Grace's voice rose. "Just because you didn't punch me doesn't mean it wasn't abuse. You always were too sensitive." Derek's tone shifted, became almost pleading. "Look, I've changed. I'm in therapy. I've been sober for 6 months. I just want a chance to be a father to my son." Grace wanted to believe in change. She really did. But she'd heard these promises before, dozens of times, and they always evaporated the moment things got difficult. You can't just show up after 3 years and expect, "What's going on here?" Both Grace and Derek turned. Marcus stood at the top of the stairs, his expression carefully neutral but his body language protective. He moved to stand beside Grace, not touching her but close enough that she could feel his solid presence. "Who the hell are you?" Derek demanded. "I'm Marcus Reeves. I'm a friend of Grace's." Marcus's voice was calm but firm. "And I'm pretty sure she just asked you to leave." Derek looked between Marcus and Grace, his expression calculating. "Ah, so you've got a boyfriend now. That was fast. What? You leave our bed and jump straight into his." "It wasn't like that," Grace started, but Marcus touched her arm gently. "You don't owe him explanations," Marcus said quietly, then addressed Derek. "I don't know your full history with Grace, and honestly, it's none of my business. But what is my business is that you're clearly making her uncomfortable, and I'm going to have to ask you to leave the property." "Or what?" Derek's hands clenched into fists. "You going to make me? Or I'm going to call the police and report that someone is harassing a resident and refusing to leave when asked." Marcus pulled out his phone. "I'm guessing that won't look great if you're trying to prove you've changed." Derek glared at Marcus, then at Grace. "This isn't over. I have rights. You can't keep my son from me forever." "If you want visitation, go through proper legal channels," Grace said, finding her voice again. "Get a lawyer. File with the court. Do it the right way. But don't show up at my home trying to intimidate me. That's not how changed people behave." For a moment, Grace thought Derek might escalate. His face flushed red and he took a step forward, but Marcus moved simultaneously, positioning himself more directly between Derek and Grace. The two men stared at each other, and something in Marcus's steady, unwavering gaze made Derek back down. "Fine," Derek spat. "Enjoy your new life, Grace, but I'll be back. With a lawyer. We'll see what a judge says about parental alienation." He stormed down the stairs, and they heard his car peel out of the parking lot with aggressive speed. Grace stood frozen, her entire body trembling with adrenaline, until Marcus gently guided her inside her apartment. "Are you okay?" he asked once the door was safely locked behind them. Grace shook her head, then nodded, then shook her head again. "I don't know. How did you know to come?" "Jennifer texted me that she was running late with the kids. I offered to come wait with you until she could bring Tommy home." Marcus hesitated. "That was him? Your ex?" "That was him." Grace sank onto her couch, suddenly exhausted. "He wants custody. Or he's threatening it anyway. I don't know if he's serious or just trying to scare me into going back." "Has he ever tried to contact you before?" "No, I've been so careful. I don't use social media. I got a new phone number. Grace's voice broke. "I thought we were safe here." Marcus sat beside her, maintaining a careful distance. "What do you want to do?" "I want him to disappear," Grace said honestly. "I want him to have never found us. I want to go back to this morning when everything was fine." "I meant practically. Do you have a lawyer? Documentation of the abuse? A protection order?" Grace laughed bitterly. "I'm a single mom working 2 jobs. Do you think I have lawyer money? I have the divorce papers from 3 years ago. I have a few photos on an old phone of bruises, but I don't know if they're still retrievable. I never filed police reports because he convinced me it wasn't that bad, that I was overreacting." "Okay," Marcus said thoughtfully. "Then we start with what you have and build from there. My sister's best friend is a family law attorney. I'll ask Jennifer to reach out, see if she can give us some guidance." "Marcus, I can't afford—" "First consultation is usually free. We'll figure out the rest." Marcus finally reached